The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky hills as Kim Dae-hyun packed his small bag with water and dried food. At 17 years old, he was supposed to be helping in the colony farms like the other young people. Instead, he found himself drawn once again to the forbidden mountains that rose beyond their settlement on Kepler 442b. "Where are you going now?" asked his mother, Lee Yuna, as she prepared breakfast in their small metal home. The colony domes stretched out around them, filled with families who had traveled across the stars to build a new life on this distant world. "Just to study the rock formations," Dae-hyun lied smoothly. He had been telling the same lie for months now. His mother sighed but did not stop him. She knew her son had always been different from the others. While most teenagers focused on their school lessons and farm work, Dae-hyun spent his free time exploring the strange landscape of their new planet. The colony administrators had marked the mountain region as off-limits 3 years ago. They said the rocks were unstable and dangerous. But Dae-hyun had been climbing those peaks since he was 14, and he knew they were lying. The mountains held secrets that the adults did not want the young people to discover. He walked through the colony streets, past the medical center where Dr. Park worked, past the communication tower where his friend Ji-won spent her days monitoring radio signals from distant Earth. The colony was small, only 5,000 people living in connected domes and underground tunnels. Everyone knew everyone else, which made sneaking away difficult. But Dae-hyun had learned the guard schedules. He knew which paths would take him past the sensor barriers without being detected. By the time the colony workers were starting their morning shifts, he was already climbing the steep rocky slopes toward the mountain caves. The caves were what first drew him to the mountains. They were not like normal caves formed by water and wind. These caves glowed with their own light, as if the rocks themselves were alive. Colony scientists had taken samples years ago and declared them safe. They said the glow came from harmless bacteria that lived in the stone. But Dae-hyun did not believe them. He had been exploring the cave system for 3 years now. Each trip took him deeper into the mountain. He had mapped dozens of tunnels and chambers, all of them filled with the same strange pulsing light. The deeper he went, the brighter the glow became, and the more convinced he became that something important was hidden in these mountains. Today felt different. As Dae-hyun approached his usual cave entrance, the light seemed brighter than ever before. The rocks around the opening pulsed with blue and white energy that made his skin tingle. He had never seen the cave glow this intensely. He pulled out his small flashlight, though he barely needed it. The cave walls provided more than enough light to see by. The tunnel stretched ahead of him, curving gently downward into the heart of the mountain. His footsteps echoed softly as he walked, following a path he had taken many times before. But after 20 minutes of walking, he found something new. A narrow passage branched off from the main tunnel, leading sharply downward. The passage was so thin he had to turn sideways to squeeze through it. The walls here glowed even brighter, filling the narrow space with dancing shadows. Dae-hyun had explored every part of this cave system, or so he thought. This passage must have opened recently, perhaps during the small earthquake they had felt last week. His heart raced with excitement as he pushed deeper into the unknown tunnel. The passage twisted and turned for what felt like hours. Sometimes, it opened into small chambers filled with glowing crystals. Sometimes it narrowed so much that Dae-hyun had to crawl on his hands and knees. But always it continued downward, deeper into the mountain than he had ever gone before. Finally, the narrow tunnel opened into something incredible. Dae-hyun stepped out onto a ledge and gasped at what he saw below him. The cavern was enormous, easily large enough to hold their entire colony, but it was not the size that took his breath away. The cavern was filled with pillars of pure light. Beams of energy stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with rainbow colors that shifted and danced like living things. The air itself seemed to sparkle with tiny points of light that floated like dust in a sunbeam. And there, suspended in the center of the cavern by a web of energy beams, hung a massive ship. Dae-hyun had seen pictures of spaceships in his school books. He had watched videos of the colony transport that brought his family to this world. But this vessel was nothing like those simple metal tubes with rocket engines. This ship looked alive. Its hull was deep black, darker than the space between stars. But as Dae-hyun watched, patterns of light flowed across its surface like veins carrying glowing blood. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the colony transport. It had a sleek, predatory shape that reminded him of the hunting, birds that soared over the colony farms. Strange symbols glowed along the ship's sides, writing in a language Dae-hyun had never seen before. The symbols pulsed in a steady rhythm that seemed to match his own heartbeat. As he stared at them, he felt a strange, pulling sensation, as if the ship was calling to him. A narrow bridge of crystal stretched from his ledge across the cavern to the ship. The bridge looked fragile, but it glowed with the same steady light as everything else in this magical place. Dae-hyun knew he should turn back. He should return to the colony and report what he had found to the administrators. Instead, he stepped onto the crystal bridge. The bridge held his weight easily, though it swayed gently as he walked across it. Below him, the energy beams continued their endless dance, filling the cavern with shifting patterns of light and shadow. The ship grew larger as he approached, until its bulk blocked out everything else. Up close, he could see that the hull was not smooth metal, but something that looked almost organic. It seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting slightly as if it were alive. The glowing symbols were larger than he had thought, each one the size of his whole body. As Dae-hyun reached the end of the bridge, a section of the ship's hull began to change. The solid surface became transparent, then opened like a flower blooming. Warm air flowed out, carrying scents of metal and energy and something else he could not identify. An airlock. The ship was inviting him inside. Every rational thought in. Dae-hyun's mind screamed at him to run. This was beyond anything the colony had prepared him for. This was first contact with alien technology, something that should be handled by trained scientists and military officers, not a curious teenager, but the pull he felt was stronger than his fear. The ship was calling to him, and he could not resist that call. He stepped through the airlock into the vessel's interior. The moment his feet touched the ship's deck, lights began to glow throughout the corridor ahead of him. The walls were smooth and curved, made of the same living metal as the hull. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing symbols and images he did not understand. Dae-hyun walked forward, drawn deeper into the ship by forces he could not explain. Behind him, the airlock sealed itself shut, cutting off his retreat to the cave and the world he knew. He was inside now, and somehow he knew there would be no going back. The ship's corridors stretched ahead of Dae-hyun like something from a dream. The walls curved smoothly around him, made of a material that seemed to be part metal and part something alive. As he walked deeper into the vessel, lights appeared. Wherever he looked, as if the ship was watching him and lighting his way. The air inside felt different from the colony domes. It was cleaner somehow, filled with a faint humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dae-hyun reached out to touch one of the walls and jerked his hand back in surprise. The surface was warm, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he felt it pulse like a heartbeat. Holographic displays flickered to life as he passed them. The images meant nothing to him, showing symbols and charts in languages he had never seen. But something about them felt familiar, as if he was remembering rather than learning. The feeling made him uncomfortable, but he could not stop walking forward. The corridor opened into a larger room filled with strange machines. Curved, panels covered the walls, their surfaces alive with flowing patterns of light. In the center of the room stood a tall cylinder filled with blue liquid. Inside the liquid, shapes moved and twisted like living smoke. Dae-hyun walked around the cylinder, studying the shapes inside. They looked almost like blueprints or technical drawings, but they moved and changed as he watched. One moment, they showed what looked like star maps. The next, they displayed complex mechanical designs that made his head hurt to look at. A soft chime sounded from somewhere in the walls. The blue liquid in the cylinder began to glow brighter, and the shapes inside moved faster. Dae-hyun stepped back as the cylinder started to open with a hiss of escaping air. Nothing came out. The blue liquid simply drained away, leaving the cylinder, empty except for wisps of glowing mist. But now the shapes that had been swimming in the liquid were projecting into the air around him, filling the room with three-dimensional images that he could walk through. One image caught his attention. It showed a young man about his own age, wearing strange clothes and standing in front of a massive ship. But not this ship. This one was white and gold, sleek and beautiful like a work of art. The young man in the image was smiling and waving at something Dae-hyun could not see. As he reached out to touch the image, it changed. Now it showed the same young man, older. Now, standing on what looked like the bridge of a starship. Around him, other people in similar uniforms worked at control stations. Through the windows behind them, Dae-hyun could see stars and distant planets. More images appeared. Battles in space between ships so advanced they looked like magic. Cities built inside asteroids, their towers reaching toward artificial suns. Creatures from other worlds, some beautiful and others terrifying, all living together in what looked like peace and humans. Everywhere in these images, Dae-hyun saw humans. Not the struggling colonists he knew, but humans who looked like they owned the galaxy. They commanded vast fleets of starships. They built worlds and moved moons. They stood as equals beside alien beings that could bend reality with their thoughts. The images faded, leaving Dae-hyun alone in the dark room. But the cylinder was glowing again, brighter than before. New symbols appeared on its surface, and, this time somehow, Dae-hyun could read them. "Command Center," the symbols said. "Authorization required." An arrow of light appeared on the floor, pointing toward another corridor. Dae-hyun followed it, his mind reeling from what he had seen. The images had felt real, like memories rather than recordings, but they showed a human civilization far more advanced than anything in his history books. The corridor led to a set of massive doors that slid open as he approached. Beyond them lay the ship's bridge, and Dae-hyun's breath caught in his throat at the sight. The room was enormous, with a curved ceiling that showed a perfect view of the stars above the mountain. Control stations arranged in tiers faced a central command chair, and every surface glowed with soft light. But it was not the room's beauty that stopped him cold. Someone was sitting in the command chair. The figure was humanoid, but clearly not, from Dae-hyun's colony. It wore a form-fitting suit that seemed to be made of the same living metal as the ship's walls. Tubes and cables connected the suit to the chair, and a helmet covered the being's head. The figure sat perfectly still, as if it had been sleeping for a very long time. Dae-hyun approached slowly, his heart pounding. As he got closer, he could see that the suit was keeping the figure alive. Lights pulsed along the cables, and a faint mist circulated inside the helmet. This being had been in some kind of suspended animation. The main control panel in front of the command chair was covered with symbols, some of which Dae-hyun could now somehow read. Ship status, life support, weapon systems, navigation. All of. It was in standby mode, waiting for someone to wake it up. His hand moved toward the control panel almost without his conscious decision. The moment his fingers touched the smooth surface, everything changed. The bridge exploded into life. Lights blazed from every panel, holographic displays filled the air, and the view of the stars above became sharp and clear. But most shocking of all, the figure in the command chair stirred. The being's head turned slowly toward Dae-hyun. Inside the helmet, he could see a face that was definitely human, though altered by the life support systems. The eyes opened, glowing with the same light that filled the ship. Human, the figure said, though its lips did not move. The voice spoke directly into Daehyun's mind, clear and strong despite the obvious age of the speaker. I am Commander Yeon Taejin of the Terran Deep Fleet. I have been waiting for someone like you for 3,000 years. Daehyun staggered, backward, but found he could not move far. Some invisible force held him in place while Commander Yeon's glowing eyes studied him. The being's thoughts pressed against his mind, not hostile but overwhelming in their intensity. You read the ship's language? Yeon continued, his mental voice filled with wonder. You activated the memory banks. You carry the genetic markers of the old bloodlines. How is this possible? Where do you come from, young one? I'm from the colony, Daehyun managed to say aloud. The human colony on this planet. We've been here for 20 years. Commander Yeon's eyes widened behind his helmet. Colony? You mean the exile settlements? They still survive? The being's excitement was palpable, flooding through the mental connection between them. Then there is hope yet. Tell me, young human, what year is it by the old calendar? Daehyun tried to remember his history lessons. It's 2387, Earth Standard Time. The commander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his mental voice was heavy with sorrow. 3,000 years. I have slept for 3,000 years while humanity forgot its heritage and scattered to the winds. But you are here now, and you can interface with Terran Deep Fleet technology. That means the genetic locks are still intact. I don't understand, Daehyun said. What is the Terran Deep Fleet? What genetic locks? Commander Yeon's form began to solidify as the ship's systems worked to revive him fully. The life support cables detached from his suit, and he stood slowly from the command chair. He was tall and lean, moving with the careful precision of someone who had been still for far too long. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair that rose from the floor beside the command station. I will show you what humanity once was, and what it must become again. The galaxy has been waiting for us to return, though it does not know it yet. As Daehyun sat down, the bridge around them began to change. The walls became transparent, showing not the cave outside, but something far more incredible. Stars streamed past in rivers of light, and vast ships moved through space like schools of luminous fish. This, Commander Yeon said, his voice now speaking aloud through the ship's speakers, is the memory of our golden age. The time when humanity ruled not through conquest, but through wisdom and strength. We were the guardians of this galaxy, young one. And if you are willing to learn, we can be so again. The visions flowed around them, showing Daehyun wonders beyond imagination. And slowly he began to understand that his simple life in the colony was about to change forever. Commander Yeon moved to the center of the bridge with careful, measured steps. The 3,000 years of sleep had left him weak, but Daehyun could see strength returning to his movements as the ship's systems continued their work of revival. The commander's suit, which had seemed like simple clothing before, now revealed itself to be a marvel of technology that monitored and supported every aspect of his body. Are you ready to learn the truth about your people? Yeon asked, his voice echoing through the bridge speakers. What I am about to show you will change everything you believe about humanity's place in the universe. Daehyun nodded, though his hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly. Everything that had happened since he entered the cave felt like a dream, but the solid reality of the ship around him proved it was all real. Commander Yeon raised his hand, and the transparent walls of the bridge came alive with images. But these were not simple recordings. They were memories, pulled from the ship's vast databanks and projected with such clarity that Daehyun felt like he was actually there. The first image showed Earth, but not the Earth from his history books. This Earth was surrounded by massive, space stations that gleamed like jewels against the black of space. Ships the size of cities moved between the stations, their hulls alive with flowing patterns of light. The blue and green planet below was perfect, its cities visible from orbit as networks of golden radiance. This was humanity's home system 3,000 years ago, Yeon explained, when we had learned to work with the forces of creation rather than against them. Our ships were grown rather than built, living beings that bonded with their crews. Our cities were gardens that cleaned the air and purified the water simply by existing. The image changed, showing other star systems. Humans worked alongside beings that defied description. Some looked like living crystals that sang in harmonies that could reshape matter. Others were clouds of intelligent gas that could exist in the vacuum of space. Still others were so alien that Daehyun's mind could barely process their forms. We were not conquerors, Yeon continued. We were partners in a great alliance that spanned the galaxy. Each species brought its own gifts to the whole. The Crystal Singers could heal worlds damaged by war or disaster. The Void Dancers could travel between dimensions. The Dream Weavers could touch the minds of entire populations and bring peace to conflicts that had raged for millennia. What did humans bring? Daehyun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Yeon smiled, and for a moment the years seemed to fall away from his face. We brought balance. Humans have a unique ability to understand and work with all other forms of life. We could speak to the Crystal Singers and learn their songs. We could dance with the Void Dancers and not lose ourselves in the infinite. We could dream with the Weavers and not be consumed by their visions. The images shifted again, showing human commanders leading mixed fleets of impossible beauty. Ships that looked like living flowers worked alongside vessels of pure energy and others that seemed to be made of crystallized music. In the center of every fleet was a human ship, not because humans commanded the others, but because they could help all the different species work together. This ship, Hawkeye 7, was one of our most advanced vessels, Yeon said, patting the wall beside him with obvious affection. Not just a warship, but a diplomat, explorer, and peacekeeper. My crew included beings from 17 different species, all working together as one family. Daehyun watched images of the ship's crew going about their duties. He saw humans working side by side with the Crystal Singers, their combined efforts, creating technologies that seemed like magic. In the ship's gardens, Void Dancers tended plants that grew in impossible colors, while Dream Weavers shared their visions with human artists to create works of beauty beyond imagination. It sounds perfect, Daehyun said. What happened? Why did it end? The happiness faded from Commander Yeon's face, replaced by an expression of deep sadness. The images around them darkened, showing space filled with shadows that seemed to devour. Light itself. They came from the space between galaxies, Yeon said quietly. We called them the Void Shepherds, though that was not their true name. Their true name could not be spoken by any living tongue. They were older than the oldest civilizations, and they had a simple purpose: to harvest the life force of entire galactic communities. The shadows in the images took shape, becoming ships that hurt to look at directly. They moved through space like holes in reality, leaving empty void where once there had been stars and planets. Wherever they passed, the Alliance fleets tried to stop them, but conventional weapons had no effect on beings that existed partially outside normal space and time. The war lasted 300 years, Yeon continued. We lost entire star systems, whole species wiped from existence. The Crystal Singers sacrificed their homeworld to create a weapon that could hurt the Shepherds. The Void Dancers opened rifts in space itself to trap the enemy fleets. The Dream Weavers shared their death agonies across the galaxy so that their knowledge would not be lost. Daehyun watched as the images showed the final battle. It took place not in normal space, but in a dimension that existed between thoughts and dreams. Human ships led the charge, their living hulls blazing with borrowed power from their alien allies. Commander Yeon's own ship was there, fighting alongside thousands of others in a battle that seemed to tear reality apart. "We won," Yeon said simply. "But the cost was everything we had built. The alliance was broken. Most of the Crystal Singers had become one with their songs, existing now as pure music in the cosmic background radiation. The Void Dancers had scattered themselves across so many dimensions that they could never fully return to our reality. The Dream Weavers had shared so much of themselves that they became part of the galactic consciousness itself." "And humanity?" Daehyun asked, though he was beginning to guess the answer. "Humanity made the hardest choice of all," Yeon replied. "We had the power to rebuild the Empire, to forge new alliances and rule the galaxy ourselves. But we had seen what power could become when it was corrupted. The Void Shepherds had once been protectors like us before they lost their way and became devourers. The images showed human fleets scattering in all directions, their advanced ships hiding themselves on distant worlds. Some went into deep sleep, like Commander Yeon. Others destroyed their own technology and started over as simple colonists. All of them carried the same mission: to preserve the knowledge and genetic markers of the old empire until they were needed again. The colonies like yours were seeded throughout the galaxy," Yeon explained. "Simple farming settlements with no memory of their true heritage, but the genetic codes were preserved, passed down through generations without the colonists even knowing. When the time came when the galaxy faced a new threat, the bloodlines would awaken." Daehyun felt a chill run down his spine. "A new threat? You mean the Void Shepherds have returned?" Commander Yeon's expression grew grim. 3 days ago, this ship detected energy signatures at the edge of your system, the same signatures we learned to recognize during the war. They have been sleeping as long as we have, recovering their strength. But now they are stirring, and they will remember us." The images around them faded, leaving the bridge in its normal soft lighting. But Daehyun's mind was reeling with everything he had learned. Humanity's true history was nothing like what he had been taught. They were not struggling colonists trying to survive on distant worlds. They were the descendants of galactic guardians, who had sacrificed everything to save the universe. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "I'm just a kid from a farming colony. I don't know anything about commanding starships or fighting cosmic wars." Commander Yeon walked over to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch sent warmth through Daehyun's body, and for a moment he felt connected to something vast and ancient. "Because you are not just anyone," Yeon said gently. "You found this ship when it needed to be found. You could read its language and activate its systems. Your genetic code carries the full pattern of the old bloodlines. You are what we have been waiting for, Daehyun. You are the key to humanity's awakening." Outside the ship, in the glowing cave, something was changing. The crystals that held Hawkeye 7 in place began to pulse with new rhythms, responding to the ship's awakening. Deep in space, ancient sensors were detecting the energy signature and sending signals to fleets that had been waiting in the dark between stars. The age of hiding was coming to an end. Humanity would soon remember what they truly were, and the galaxy would never be the same. Back at the colony, Lee Ji-won sat at her communication station watching the screens that monitored radio signals from across their sector of space. As the colony's youngest communications officer, she spent most of her days listening to the background, noise of the universe, hoping to catch signals from Earth or other human settlements. But today, something was different. The screens showed energy readings unlike anything she had ever seen before. Massive power signatures were appearing at the edge of their solar system, and they were moving closer. "Dr. Park," she called across the communications center. "You need to see this." Dr. Park Hyun-woo hurried over to her station, his face creased with concern. As the colony's lead scientist, he had seen many strange phenomena on this alien world, but nothing that compared to what Ji-won's screens were showing. "These readings are impossible," he muttered, studying the data. Nothing we know about could generate this much energy. Are you sure the equipment is working correctly? Before Ji-won could answer, her personal communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Administrator Choi Soon-mi. All department heads were to report to the main conference room immediately. Something was happening that required the attention of the colony's leadership. Meanwhile, deep in the mountain caves, Dae-hyun was learning to interface with Hawkeye 7's systems. Commander Yeon had guided him to a secondary control station designed for what the commander called a neural interface specialist. When Dae-hyun placed his hands on the smooth surface, his mind suddenly expanded to encompass the entire ship. He could feel the vessel's vital systems like parts of his own body. The fusion reactors hummed in his chest. The sensor arrays extended, his sight across the star system. The bio-neural networks that ran through the ship's hull carried his thoughts to every corner of the massive vessel. This is how human crews bonded with their ships in the old days, Commander Yeon explained. The vessels were not just machines, but partners. Each ship developed its own personality through its connection with its crew. Hawkeye 7 has been sleeping for 3,000 years, but it remembers everything. Through the ship's sensors, Dae-hyun could see far beyond the cave. He watched the colony going about its daily business, unaware that their simple farming settlement sat above one of the most advanced warships ever built. He could see the communication center where Ji-won worked, the medical facility where Dr. Park conducted his research, the administrative complex where decisions were made about their small community's future. But he could also see something else. Dark shapes were moving at the edge of the solar system, barely visible even to Hawkeye 7's advanced sensors. They moved wrong, like holes in space that hurt to look at directly. "They have found us," Commander Yeon said quietly. "The Void Shepherds are coming." In the colony conference room, Administrator Choi Soon-mi faced a room full of worried department heads. Dr. Park had shared his analysis of the energy readings, and the implications were troubling. The colony had protocols for many emergencies, but first contact with alien forces was not something their small settlement was prepared to handle. "Our defensive capabilities are limited," reported Security Chief Nam Ji-seok. "We have mining lasers and construction equipment, but nothing designed for combat. If these energy signatures represent hostile forces, we would be defenseless." "Maybe they are not hostile," suggested Dr. Im Soo-young from the biology department. "These could be explorers or traders. We should try to establish communication before assuming the worst." Ji-won raised her hand hesitantly. "There is something else," she said. "Before these energy signatures appeared, I detected a massive power source activating somewhere in the mountain region. It started about 6 hours ago and has been growing stronger ever since." The room fell silent. The mountain region was off-limits to colonists, marked as geologically unstable. But everyone knew that some of the younger people explored the area despite the restrictions. "Could someone from the colony have activated something up there?" Administrator Choi asked. Before anyone could answer, the lights in the conference room flickered. Then every screen in the building lit up with the same image. A young man they all recognized standing on what looked like the bridge of an advanced starship. "Dae-hyun," Ji-won whispered, staring at the screen in shock. On the screen, Dae-hyun looked directly at them, but his eyes were different, glowing with the same light that filled the mysterious ship around him. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that had not been there before, as if he was speaking with more than just his own vocal cords. "People of Kepler Colony," he said, his words reaching every screen and speaker in the settlement. "I am speaking to you from Hawkeye 7, a vessel of the Terran Deep Fleet. You are in immediate danger. Enemy forces are approaching our system and we must prepare for battle." The conference room erupted in confused voices. Dr. Park was frantically checking his equipment, trying to understand how a 17-year-old boy could be broadcasting from a ship that did not exist in any of their databases. Security Chief Nam was demanding explanations that no one could provide. But Administrator Choi was studying the image more carefully. She had been the colony's leader for 8 years, and she had learned to recognize truth even when it came in. Impossible packages. Everyone be quiet, she ordered. The room fell silent as she leaned toward the screen. Daehyun, if that is really you, prove it. Tell us something only you would know. On the screen, Daehyun smiled sadly. 3 years ago, you caught me climbing the Forbidden Mountains. You made me promise never to go back there. You said the rocks were too dangerous, but we both knew you were lying. You were protecting something, weren't you, Administrator Choi? Something the original colony planners knew was hidden in those mountains. Choi's face went pale. There were classified files that only she and the other founding administrators had access to. Files that mentioned anomalous energy readings in the mountain region that had been detected during the initial planetary survey. How do you know about that? She whispered. Because I am connected to systems that remember everything, Daehyun replied, including the real reason this colony was established. We were not just farmers looking for a new world. We were placed here as guardians, even though we did not know it. Commander Yeon stepped into view beside Daehyun. The alien appearance of his suit and the obvious age in his face made several people in the conference room gasp. I am Commander Yeon Taijin, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets across the galaxy. I have been sleeping in this ship for 3,000 years, waiting for the time when humanity would need to remember its true heritage. That time has come. The conference room was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at the screen, trying to process what they were seeing and hearing. The enemy forces approaching your system are called Void Shepherds, Commander Yeon continued. They are ancient beings that consume the life force of entire civilizations. 3,000 years ago, humanity led a galactic alliance that defeated them, but at great cost. Now they have returned, and you are the only humans in position to stop them. Dr. Park found his voice first. This is impossible. Humanity has never had the technology you are describing. Our records go back centuries, and we have always been a single-planet species until the colony ships. Your records were altered, Yeon replied gently. Part of the Great Hiding. Humanity scattered itself across the galaxy and deliberately forgot its own power to prevent it from being corrupted. But the genetic markers were preserved, passed down through bloodlines like yours. When the time came for awakening, the right person would find the right ship. On her screen, Ji-won could see energy readings spiking across all frequencies. Whatever was happening in the mountains was building toward something massive. What do you want from us? Administrator Choi asked. Daehyun leaned forward, his glowing eyes meeting hers through the screen. We need to prepare the colony for evacuation. Hawkeye 7 can protect everyone, but not if they remain scattered across the settlement, and we need volunteers who are willing to learn the ship's systems. The enemy will be here in less than 2 days. Volunteers for what? Security Chief, Nam demanded. To become the crew of a Terran Deep Fleet warship, Commander Yeon answered. To help us awaken the ship's full capabilities and remember what humanity truly is. To stand against the darkness that threatens not just your colony, but every living thing in this galaxy. The screen flickered and went dark, leaving the conference room in stunned silence. Outside, the mountain region glowed brighter than ever before, visible even in the afternoon sunlight. Administrator Choi looked around the room at her colleagues and friends, people she had worked with for years to build a simple farming community on a distant world. Now they were being asked to become something none of them had ever imagined possible. Ji-won, she said finally, how long would it take to evacuate the entire colony? If we use all our transport vehicles, maybe 8 hours, Ji-won replied. But Administrator, you cannot seriously be considering this. Choi was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the classified files she had never expected to need. Files that mentioned contingency plans for exactly this kind of situation. Dr. Park led a team of 12 colonists up the mountain path toward the glowing caves. Behind them, the rest of the colony was busy preparing for what might be the strangest evacuation in human history. Transport vehicles loaded with essential supplies moved through the streets while families packed what they could carry. The climb took 3 hours, even with Dae-hyun's coordinates guiding them. When they finally reached the cave entrance, Dr. Park stopped in amazement. The entire mountain face was alive with pulsing light that seemed to respond to their presence. "This is not possible," he muttered, taking readings with his scientific instruments. "The energy output from this location could power our entire colony for 100 years. Engineer Nam Ji-seok, who had volunteered for the team despite his concerns, studied the cave opening with professional interest. "The rock formations have been altered. This is not natural geology. Something has been shaping this mountain from the inside." They entered the cave following the path Dae-hyun had described. The glowing walls provided more than enough light to see by, and the air was clean and warm despite being deep underground. But nothing could have prepared them for the sight of the enormous cavern with its suspended starship. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Im Soo-young, the colony's chief biologist. "It is real." The ship hung in its web of energy beams exactly as Dae-hyun had described, but now they could see it was even larger than they had imagined. The vessel stretched nearly half a kilometer from nose to tail, its dark hull covered with flowing patterns of light that moved like living things. A section of the ship's hull opened as they approached, revealing Dae-hyun standing in the airlock. But he looked different now. His clothes had been replaced by a form-fitting suit similar to Commander Yeon's, and his eyes glowed with the same inner light as the ship itself. "Welcome aboard Hawkeye 7, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their bones. "Commander Yeon is waiting for you on the bridge." Dr. Park was the first to step into the airlock, followed by the others. The ship's interior was even more impressive than its exterior, with corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions and walls that glowed with soft, welcoming light. On the bridge, Commander Yeon stood before the main display screens, showing tactical information that made Dr. Park's scientific mind reel. Energy signatures, movement patterns, and weapon configurations filled the holographic displays with data that was clearly far beyond current human understanding. "Doctor," Commander Yeon said without turning around, "your timing is perfect. The enemy vanguard will arrive in 14 hours. "Enemy vanguard?" Dr. Park asked. "How many ships are we talking about?" Commander Yeon gestured to the main screen, which showed a three-dimensional map of their solar system. Red dots were moving. Inward from the outer edge, dozens of them approaching from multiple directions. 47 Void Shepherd vessels, Yeon replied calmly. "A typical scouting force. They will test our defenses and call for reinforcements if they encounter serious resistance." Engineer Nam studied the display with growing alarm. 47 ships? How can one vessel fight against so many? "Because this is not just any vessel," Dae-hyun answered, his hand resting on a control panel that pulsed with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. "Hawkeye 7 was designed to fight entire fleets, but it needs a crew to reach its full potential." Commander Yeon turned to face the group of colonists. "That is why you are here. Dr. Park, your scientific knowledge will help us adapt the ship's systems to work with your colony's technology. Engineer Nam, we need your skills to interface our power systems with your settlement's infrastructure. Dr. Im, your understanding of biology will be crucial for the neural interface process." "Neural interface?" Dr. Im asked nervously. "The ship responds to human thought and emotion," Yeon explained. "But it needs multiple minds working together to achieve maximum efficiency. A single person, even one as naturally gifted as Dae-hyun, cannot handle all the ship's systems during combat." On the main screen, new alarms began flashing. The red dots representing enemy ships had suddenly accelerated, cutting their estimated arrival time in half. "They have detected our activation," Commander Yeon said grimly. The Void Shepherds remember the energy signature of Terran Deep Fleet vessels. They are coming faster now. Back at the colony, Administrator Choi received the urgent message from Dr. Park's team. The evacuation timeline had been cut from 2 days to 7 hours. Every transport vehicle in the settlement was pressed into service, carrying families and essential equipment toward the mountain caves. Jiwon coordinated the evacuation from the communications center, her screens showing the progress of each transport group. But she was also monitoring something else. Deep space. Sensors were detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. "Administrator," she called across the busy room, "I am picking up something new, much larger than the ships we detected before." On her screen, a single massive signature appeared behind the advancing enemy fleet. It was easily 10 times larger than the biggest ship they had seen so far, and it was moving through space in a way that defied everything Ji-won knew about physics. Meanwhile, on Hawkeye 7, the first group of volunteers was learning to interface with the ship's neural networks. Dr. Park sat at a science station that seemed to read his thoughts and translate them into commands for the ship's sensors. Engineer Nam was connected to the power distribution systems, feeling the flow of energy through the vessel like water through pipes. Dr. Im found herself at what Commander Yeon called the Life Support Coordination Station. Through the neural link, she could sense every living thing on the ship and monitor their health and stress levels in real time. "This is incredible," she whispered. "I can feel the ship's bio-neural networks. They are alive in a way I never imagined possible." But the most dramatic change was in Daehyun himself. As more people connected to the ship's systems, his role evolved from operator to coordinator. He became the central hub through which all the other neural interfaces communicated, his consciousness expanding to encompass the entire vessel and everyone aboard it. "I can see through all the ship's sensors at once," he reported to Commander Yeon. "The colony evacuation is proceeding on schedule. Most families are already in the transport vehicles heading toward the caves." "And the enemy?" Yeon asked. Daehyun's expression darkened. "They will be here in 4 hours. But, Commander, there is something else. A much larger ship is following behind the attack fleet. Its energy signature is different from the others." Commander Yeon studied the tactical display with growing concern. "A harvest ship. I had hoped we would not face one of those so soon. They only send harvest ships when they intend to consume an entire world." "What does that mean?" Dr. Park asked. "It means the Void Shepherds are not just here to destroy your colony," Yeon replied. "They want to drain the life force from everything on this planet. Every plant, every animal, every microbe. When they are finished, this world will be nothing but dead rock drifting in space." Engineer Nam looked up from his station. "Can we stop something that large?" "Hawkeye 7 has weapons that can crack moons," Commander Yeon said. "But we will need perfect coordination between all crew members and full power from the ship's systems. Most importantly, we will need to remember what humanity truly is." On the main screen, more alarms began flashing as the enemy fleet divided into attack formations. The Void Shepherds were spreading out to surround the planet, cutting off any chance of escape. "All colony transports have reached the cave system," Daehyun reported. 5,000 people are now aboard the ship or in the secured areas around it. Commander Yeon nodded grimly. "Then it is time to awaken Hawkeye 7 completely. Dr. Park, Engineer Nam, Dr. Im, are you ready to see what human beings are truly capable of when they work together with technology designed to channel their will?" Through the neural link, all 3 colonists could feel something vast stirring within the ship's systems. Power levels that had been at standby began climbing toward full capacity. Weapon systems that had slept for 3,000 years came online with readiness that made the air itself vibrate with potential energy. But they could also feel something else: the approaching darkness of the Void Shepherd fleet, hungry shadows that had crossed the empty space between galaxies to feed on the life force of entire worlds. "Remember," Commander Yeon said, as the ship began to rise from its crystal cradle, "you are not just colonists anymore. You are the crew of a Terran Deep Fleet warship. You carry the legacy of humanity's greatest age and the hope of every living thing in this galaxy." Outside the mountain, the first enemy ships appeared in the sky like dark stars that hurt to look at directly. The battle for Kepler 442b was about to begin, and deep in space, the massive harvest ship continued its approach, patient and inexorable as death itself. Hawkeye 7 broke free from its crystal prison with a sound like music and thunder combined. The mountain cave that had hidden it for 3,000 years cracked open as the massive ship rose into the alien sky of Kepler 442b. Below, the evacuated. Colonists watched through viewing ports as their new home fell away beneath them. On the bridge, Dae-hyun felt the ship's systems coming fully online for the first time in millennia. Through the neural link, he could sense every weapon, every shield, generator, every quantum engine as they awakened. But he could also feel the fear and determination of 5,000 colonists who had gone from simple farmers to starship passengers in a single day. "Enemy contact in 30 seconds, announced Dr. Park from his science station. The ship's sensors were so advanced that he could track individual enemy vessels across the entire solar system. 47 ships in attack formation surrounding the planet. Commander Yeon stood at the center of the bridge, his 3,000-year-old body moving with the fluid grace of someone born to command warships. "Dr. Im, how are the colonists handling the transition?" Through her life support interface, Dr. Im monitored the stress levels of everyone aboard. "Surprisingly well. The ship's bio-neural networks are keeping everyone calm. It is like the vessel itself is reassuring them." "Because it is," Yeon replied. "Hawkeye 7 was designed to care for its crew as much as fight enemies." "Engineer. Nam, power levels?" Nam watched energy readings that climbed beyond anything his colony training had prepared him for. "Fusion reactors at full capacity. Quantum generators are stable. We have enough power to run our entire colony for 1,000 years." "Good," Yeon said, "because we are about to use most of it." The first enemy ships appeared on the main screen, and the colonists gasped at the sight of them. The Void Shepherd vessels looked like holes cut out of reality itself. They moved through space without engines, propelled by forces that seemed to bend the laws of physics around them. "They are launching attack patterns," Dae-hyun reported, his consciousness spread across the ship's tactical systems. "Trying to surround us and cut off our escape routes." Commander Yeon smiled grimly. "They remember the old tactics, but they have forgotten what happens when a Terran Deep Fleet warship stops hiding." He placed his hand on the central command console, and suddenly the entire ship transformed. The dark hull that had seemed so lifeless before blazed with patterns of light that flowed like living fire. The symbols along the sides began to pulse with energy that made space itself ripple around them. "All crew members, prepare for combat." "Acceleration," Yeon announced through the ship's communication system. "Remember, you are not passengers. You are the neural interface crew of humanity's most advanced warship. Trust in yourselves and in each other." The first enemy attack came as beams of dark energy that seemed to absorb light itself. But Hawkeye 7's shields deflected them easily, the protective barriers flaring with rainbow colors as they dispersed the alien weapons. "Return fire," Commander Yeon ordered. What happened next was unlike anything the colonists had imagined possible. Hawkeye 7's weapons were not simple energy beams or projectile launchers. They were focused applications of fundamental forces that could reshape matter at the quantum level. Beams of pure creation energy lanced out from the ship, each one precisely targeted by the combined thoughts of the neural interface crew. Where they struck enemy vessels, the alien ships simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but unmade at the most basic level of reality. "Direct hits on 6 targets," Dae-hyun reported, his voice filled with amazement. "They are just gone." But the enemy was not helpless. The remaining Void Shepherd ships began to coordinate their attacks, their dark energy weapons combining into beams powerful enough to test even Hawkeye 7's advanced shields. Shields down to 80%, Engineer Nam reported. But holding steady. Through the neural link, the colonists could feel the ship's systems adapting to the enemy attacks. The bioneural networks were learning from each hit, adjusting the shield frequencies to better resist the alien weapons. "This is incredible," Dr. Park whispered from his science station. "The ship is evolving its defenses in real time. It is using our combined creativity to solve problems faster than any computer could." But on the main screen, a new threat was appearing. The massive Harvest ship had finally arrived at the edge of the solar system, and its presence made space itself seem to darken around it. "Commander," Daehyun said, his voice tight with strain, "that thing is the size of a small moon, and it is drawing power from somewhere outside normal space." Commander Yeon studied the tactical display with growing concern. "A Harvest ship with dimensional tethers. It is connected to the void between galaxies, drawing on the consumed life force of entire worlds that the Shepherds have already destroyed. Can we fight something that powerful?" asked Dr. Im. "We have to," Yeon replied. "Because if that ship reaches this planet, it will drain every living thing in this system. Plants, animals, bacteria, even the colonists themselves. Everything will become fuel for the Void Shepherd's endless hunger." The battle intensified as more enemy ships joined the attack, but something strange was happening. As the colonists worked together through the neural interface, their individual skills were combining in ways that created abilities none of them had possessed alone. Dr. Park's scientific knowledge merged with Engineer Nam's technical expertise to create targeting solutions of impossible precision. Dr. Im's understanding of biological systems connected with Daehyun's intuitive grasp of the ship's networks to optimize life support and neural coordination beyond anything the original designers had imagined. "We are becoming something new," Daehyun realized, his consciousness expanding to encompass not just the ship, but the combined minds of everyone connected to its systems. Human and ship, individual and collective, working together in perfect harmony. Commander Yeon felt it too. For 3,000 years, he had been alone with only the ship's artificial intelligence for company. Now he was part of a neural network that included thousands of human minds, all working toward the same goal. "This is what we lost in the Great Hiding," he said, wonder in his voice. "Not just our technology, but our ability to truly connect with each other and with the ships we built. Hawkeye 7 is not just awakening, it is evolving." The Harvest ship began its final approach, dark tendrils of energy reaching out toward the planet's surface. Where they touched, forests began to wither and die, their life force being drawn up into the alien vessel's vast storage systems. "All weapons, maximum power," Commander Yeon ordered. "Target the dimensional tethers connecting that ship to the void. If we can cut those connections, it will be limited to only the power it carries within itself." What followed was a battle fought on multiple levels of reality. Hawkeye 7's weapons reached through normal space into the dimensional channels that fed the Harvest ship, severing connections that had existed for millions of years. The enemy vessel fought back with weapons that could unmake entire planets, but the Warbird's adaptive shields held against attacks that would have shattered moons. Through it all, the colonists worked as one mind distributed across thousands of individual bodies. Children in the ship's sheltered areas contributed their natural creativity to the targeting systems. Adults with years of farming experience helped optimize the ship's bio-neural networks. Even the elderly shared their wisdom through the neural links, their life experience becoming part of the ship's decision-making process. "The dimensional tethers are severed," Daehyun announced as the last connection was cut. "The Harvest ship is operating on stored power only." But the alien vessel was still massive beyond imagination, and it turned its full attention toward destroying Hawkeye 7. Dark energy beams capable of cracking continents focused on the human warship, testing its shields to their absolute limits. "Shields down to 20%, Engineer Nam reported. "I do not know how much more we can take." It was then that Commander Yeon made a decision that would have been impossible with a normal crew. "All neural interface participants, prepare for complete consciousness merger. We are going to become one with Hawkeye 7 itself." The colonists felt the ship's neural networks opening completely, inviting them to merge not just their skills but their very identities with the vessel's bioneural systems. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, like dissolving into something vast and beautiful and utterly alien. But when the merger was complete, Hawkeye 7 was no longer just a ship with a human crew. It had become something entirely new, a fusion of human consciousness and ancient technology that was greater than the sum of its parts. The final attack came as a focused beam of creation energy that pierced through the Harvest ship's armor and reached its core power systems. The alien vessel, cut off from its dimensional power sources and overwhelmed by weapons it could not understand, simply collapsed in on itself and vanished. The remaining Void Shepherd ships, seeing their greatest weapon destroyed, fled back into the dark between stars. The battle was over. On the bridge of Hawkeye 7, the colonists slowly separated their consciousness from the ship's neural networks, returning to their individual selves but forever changed.